So imagine looking at a photo of your 5-year-old self. Just picture in your mind for a second.
Okay, I can see it.
Now, I want you to imagine that that exact 5-year-old is secretly making, like, every major decision in your adult life right now.
Which is a pretty terrifying thought,
It
honestly.
really is. I mean, they're choosing who you marry, they're dictating how you act in board meetings, and deciding exactly why you panic when your boss sends you a 2-word email.
Right, something like call me.
Yes, just call me, and you go into absolute panic mode. So today, we are doing a deep dive into decoding your emotional inheritance.
And it is a profound shift in perspective, especially when you realize, how new this whole idea actually is.
Wait, really? What do you mean new?
Well, for the vast majority of human history, childhood was considered completely irrelevant. It was basically treated as a waiting room for adulthood.
Huh. Just something you had to get through.
Exactly. Think of Plato, right? He is one of the most influential thinkers of antiquity, a man whose ideas literally shaped Western civilization. And we know absolutely nothing about his childhood.
Wow. Literally nothing.
Nothing. It simply didn't occur to anyone to record what was happening in his mind before he turned 18. Decoding the past was just seen as a complete waste of time.
That is wild to think about.
It is. It wasn't until 1811 that the German writer Goethe published what's widely considered the first detailed, intimate autobiography charting his childhood states of mind.
Which means this whole concept of our childhood shaping us is, historically speaking, brand new.
Grand no.
And I think that really sets the mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a truly eye-opening source from the School of Life called How to Overcome Your Childhood.
It's a fantastic text.
It really is. And this deep dive is entirely for you, the listener. We're going to explore why we instinctively hide from our early years, how our childhood traumas are currently masquerading as our adult personalities, and ultimately, how we can finally achieve genuine emotional maturity.
Because decoding your past, it isn't some self-indulgent hobby. It is the ultimate shortcut to a less anxious, more fulfilled present.
Right. But the challenge here is that we possess this fierce, almost biological resistance to actually doing this work.
Oh, absolutely. The source outlines 3 distinct mechanisms we use to avoid looking back, and the first one is just selective amnesia.
Like we literally just forget.
We genuinely feel like we've forgotten. I mean, if you can't remember the color of the carpet in your childhood bedroom, your 5-year-old self starts to feel like a fictional character rather than the architect of your current life.
That makes a lot of sense. And when we do remember things, we tend to act like PR managers for our own pasts.
Oh, we are the best spin doctors.
We edit it to be overly sentimental. We frame the photo of a smiling mother standing by the pool, and we, conveniently erase the memory of a silent, tense dinner or a door being slammed in a rage. We just curate the narrative so it feels safe.
And we do that because of the third mechanism, which is squeamishness.
Squeamishness.
Yeah.
Like being grossed out.
Sort of. It is incredibly agonizing for the human mind to hold 2 conflicting truths. Realizing we might harbor deep, venomous resentment toward the very people we were supposed to love unconditionally, our caregivers, it creates massive cognitive dissonance.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It really is. So to bypass these incredibly strong conscious defenses, psychologists sometimes use this seemingly childish exercise called the drawing test.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah. They simply hand you a piece of paper and ask you to draw your childhood home, your parents, and yourself.
It acts like a sneaky emotional x-ray, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're drawing, you aren't thinking about complex psychoanalytic theory. You're just trying to get the roof of the house to look right.
Exactly. You're focused on the mechanics. And by giving the brain a mechanical task, your unconscious just spills out onto the page. You catch yourself unawares.
What kind of things are they looking for in a stick figure drawing, though?
Well, the psychologist will look at proximity. For one, did you draw your parents standing right next to you holding your hand, or did you draw them on the completely other side of a massive lawn?
Oh, wow. Because distance on the page equals emotional distance.
Precisely. They also look at the house itself. Does it have large, welcoming windows, or is it a windowless fortress? Transparency hints at how safe and connected you felt to the outside world.
That is so revealing.
It is. While it's not a rigorous diagnostic tool, it visually forces us to confront feelings of isolation, fear, or distance that we've spent decades papering over.
Okay, but I want to push back on something here, though.
Sure.
The source takes this idea of childhood distance and completely redefines the concept of privilege. And, we usually think of privilege in strictly material terms, a swimming pool, a massive house,
Right.
expensive ski trips. But the text argues that true privilege is purely emotional. Is having a parent who shields you from their adult anxiety, who doesn't demand perfection. But frankly, isn't saying a mansion with a cold parent is worse than a bungalow with a loving parent a bit reductive?
I can see how it sounds that way.
I mean, doesn't poverty cause its own massive, undeniable emotional trauma? It feels like we are ignoring the reality of financial struggle just to romanticize a cozy, emotionally open bungalow.
That's a really fair point. And to be clear, poverty absolutely causes deep systemic trauma. The source isn't denying the crushing weight of material deprivation at all.
Okay, so what is the distinction they're making?
The argument is really about how society validates trauma. If you grew up in poverty, society readily agrees that you faced hardship. Your trauma is visible, it's culturally acknowledged, but emotional bankruptcy, that is invisible.
I see where this is going.
If you grew up with a full fridge, a nice car in the driveway, but a deeply repressed or explosive parent, society insists you had a quote-unquote good childhood. You're basically told you have nothing to complain about.
So you end up gaslighting yourself.
Exactly. You internalize the idea that your profound feelings of emptiness must just be a character flaw. Because look at all this great stuff you had.
That is heavy.
It is. True privilege, in the psychological sense, is receiving the nectar of unconditional love. It's a parent who doesn't crumple if you call them an idiot, who loves you simply because you exist, not because of what you achieve.
And because we misunderstand this invisible emotional privilege, we completely fail to recognize the wounds we carry into adulthood.
Spot on. And this lack of emotional privilege manifests in our daily behavior in incredibly sneaky, subtle ways.
Let's talk about those sneaky symptoms, starting with romantic relationships. Because the source dives into our attraction to difficult partners.
This is a big one.
I think we all like to believe we are out there looking for kindness. We want someone supportive and loving. But if you grew up with a lack of emotional privilege, you aren't actually looking for kindness, are you?
No, you're not. You are looking for familiarity.
Familiar.
We love along grooves formed in childhood. If the love you imbibed as a toddler was heavily entwined with feeling inadequate, or managing a fragile caregiver, or tiptoeing around anger, your brain associates those specific anxieties with the feeling of love.
That explains so much. So, you might go on a date with a perfectly healthy, secure, kind person and immediately categorize them as boring.
Because there's no puzzle to solve.
Right. If they just text you back right away and say they like you, your brain doesn't register it as romance. It registers it as a flat line.
The healthy partner doesn't make you suffer in the specific way your childhood template requires for love to feel real.
That is just, wow.
You are magnetically drawn to the naughty issues that demand your childlike defensive moves. Unconsciously, you're trying to recreate the original trauma, but this time you want to win.
You want to finally fix them.
Yes, you want to finally get the distant person to open up or the angry person to calm down. The goal of recognizing this isn't necessarily to immediately dump your partner, though.
Right. We're not advocating for mass breakups here.
No, it's to recognize the dynamic. When they pull away, instead of reverting to a panicked, guilty 5-year-old, you can respond to their difficult behavior as a grounded adult.
Okay, shifting gears a bit.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself agreeing to go to a dinner party you absolutely dread? Or taking on a project at work you literally have no time for just because you couldn't bear to say no?
I think we all have.
You probably think you're just being polite. You're a team player, a nice person. But the source bluntly describes the people pleaser as a liar.
Which is a harsh word.
It's brutal, but it explains that you aren't lying to be manipulative, like some mastermind. You are lying out of absolute terror.
It is a deeply poignant kind of lying. If you grew up with a parent who flew into a volcanic rage at any sign of disagreement, the question of what you wanted became completely secondary to the priority of surviving the afternoon.
You're just playing defense.
Constantly, you had to maniacally second-guess the desires of others just to keep the peace.
So today, you act like the perfect partner or the most agreeable friend, but you are secretly harboring these dark resentments.
Then you are endangering everyone's ability to actually know you because you refuse to speak frankly.
And you're doing it because your brain is operating on the assumption that the person in front of you, whether it's your boss, your spouse, your friend, is as fragile or explosive as your parent was.
And the worst part is, society actively encourages this pathology.
Hmm?
Society loves a people pleaser because they are convenient.
True.
This is the danger of emotional inheritance. The world often rewards our deepest traumas.
Which brings up the overachiever, because society literally hands out awards, scholarships, and corner offices to overachievers. But the text links this relentless drive directly to snobbish parents.
Yes, and they define a snob in a very specific way.
Right, not just someone who likes yachts and caviar, but as someone who lacks an independent center of judgment.
Exactly. A snob only values what the in-group esteems. They completely outsource their self-worth to societal metrics. So when a snob has a baby, they experience a profound hidden panic.
Because a baby can't achieve anything.
Right. A baby cannot dazzle the world, it cannot land a promotion, it cannot speak 3 languages, it literally just dribbles. The snobbish parent implicitly makes it clear that worldly achievement is the absolute prerequisite for love.
So the child internalizes that if they aren't producing, they aren't lovable.
Yes.
They might become the golden child, unconsciously tasked with redeeming a parent's failed career or miserable marriage. And because they get straight A's and praise from teachers, they can go decades without realizing they are emotionally starving.
Because they are trying to solve a psychological problem, a lack of unconditional love, through material or worldly means.
Which is an impossible equation. No amount of money or prestige can go back in time and make your mother love you just for existing.
It's tragic. The tragedy of the overachiever is that the more they succeed, the more isolated they feel, because they know they are only loved for the mask they wear.
And that mask is what the famous 20th century psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called the false self. The source dives deep into his work.
Winnicott is a legend in this field.
He really is. He argued that a healthy infant actually must be allowed to be their true self, which is entirely asocial, aggressive, selfish, and screaming.
Winnicott observed that if an infant is forced to adapt to a fragile parent's needs too early, say, if they have to be good to prevent their mother from crying or their father from withdrawing, they become obedient at the expense of their ability to feel authentic.
They shut themselves down.
Exactly. They build a compliant, deadened, false self to interact with the world, while the true self goes into hiding just to survive.
That is so sad.
To feel real as an adult, you must have enjoyed the privilege of being untrammeled as an infant. You need to know that your infantile rage will not destroy the world.
The source compares two hypothetical families to illustrate this perfectly. So family one has the quiet, well-behaved child. They politely finish their dinner, they do their homework without being asked, they never talk back.
The dream child for a lot of parents.
Right, and then family two has the child who calls their mom an idiot, snorts at their dad, and slams the door in a rage. And the shocking conclusion here is that the naughty child in family two is actually much healthier.
Because the compliant child is heading for rigidity and a harsh, punishing conscience. What we label as naughtiness in family two is actually an early, vital exploration of independence.
That child knows their environment is robust enough to handle their raw authenticity.
Yes. The compliant child is just terrified that if they step out of line, the entire family structure will collapse. But eventually, the pressure of maintaining that false self for 20 or 30 years becomes completely unbearable.
And that is when the breakdown occurs.
The breakdown.
So what does this actually mean mechanically? I mean, I love this analogy. A mental breakdown isn't the machine breaking, it's like a worker strike.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. The emotional self is literally shutting down the factory because the management, the false self, has been ignoring safety violations for decades. The repressed true self is finally demanding to be heard, smashing the machinery on the factory floor. So management has absolutely no choice but to stop production and come to the negotiating table.
A breakdown is a desperate, inarticulate bid for health. It is an appetite for growth that just hasn't found another way of expressing itself.
That reframes everything.
It really does. When society medicalizes a breakdown and tries to just medicate the person or rush them back to business as usual, we miss the entire point.
Because business as usual is what caused the strike.
Exactly. The breakdown is showing that business as usual is exactly what was killing them. The workers are demanding safety, rest, and authenticity.
Okay, so if a breakdown is this attempted revolution by the mind, how do we actually negotiate with the union? We can't just stay on strike forever, paralyzed in bed.
Right, you need a mediator. And the source points to psychotherapy as the specific arena for this negotiation. But it doesn't just say, go to therapy. It outlines 3 mechanical reasons why psychotherapy actually works.
What's the first one?
The first mechanism is bringing the unconscious to light. You cannot negotiate with a union whose demands you haven't read. Psychotherapy provides a space to articulate the invisible scripts running your life.
Makes total sense.
And the second? The second mechanism is transference.
Okay, let's unpack transference, because honestly, it sounds like psychobabble. How does it actually work in a room?
Transference is when a patient starts behaving toward the therapist in ways that echo their past traumas.
Give me an example.
Okay, imagine you are in a session and the therapist briefly glances at the clock. If you had a punitive, dismissive father, your brain might instantly register that glance as a profound rejection. Suddenly, you feel like an 8-year-old wasting your dad's precious time, and you become furious or apologetic. But the therapist doesn't get defensive. They help you observe that distortion in real time. They ask, what just happened? Why did that glance feel so dangerous to you?
So they absorb the projection,
Exactly.
which leads to the third mechanism, which is providing the first good relationship. The therapist essentially becomes the reliable, sturdy parent you never had.
Yes, and the source mentions a famous story about Winnicott to illustrate this.
Oh, the vase story. This is wild.
It is. He had a patient who literally smashed his favorite vase in his office and another patient who stole his money. Winnicott just stayed calm.
He didn't call the cops?
He didn't retaliate. He didn't throw them out. He let them safely regress to their delinquent true selves because they had never been allowed to test boundaries as kids.
He proved that their raw, aggressive true selves would not destroy him.
That absorption of anger without collapse was exactly the healing they needed. But to achieve this healing, the source makes a crucial distinction. It highlights the vast difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing it emotionally.
Knowing a fact, saying out loud, my dad was distant, does absolutely nothing to cure neurosis. You have to feel it.
They say, we need the novel, not the essay.
Which brings up a question I think a lot of our more analytical listeners might have.
I can guess what it is.
Right. If I'm a highly intellectual person, I've read all the psychology books, I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, and I can map out exactly why my parents messed me up. Isn't going back into the novel of my past just unnecessary wallowing? Like, what is the actual utility of remembering the texture of my corduroy pants and crying about it at 2 in the afternoon?
It's a fair question, but intellectualizing is just a brilliant defense mechanism. It keeps you safe in the realm of concepts, far away from the messiness of actual feelings.
So it's another shield.
Exactly. You cannot heal a visceral wound with a thesis statement. The brain's emotional centers don't respond to logic, they respond to experience.
Oh.
When you go back into the novel, when you remember the ambient light in the study, the smell of the carpet, the visceral physical terror in your chest, you are re-experiencing the sorrow. But this time, you are doing it in the presence of a supportive therapist or your own mature adult self. You are physically teaching your nervous system a new outcome to an old memory.
You are rewriting the code.
You are.
And that connects to how we learn to self-soothe. Because if you wake up in a panic at 3 a.m., you cannot soothe yourself if you weren't physically and emotionally soothed as a helpless infant.
Right.
If you were left to scream in the dark because your parents thought it would, toughen you up, your brain never downloaded that calm, reassuring software. You literally have to go back in time emotionally and install the software yourself.
By allowing yourself to feel the raw pain and then surviving it in the present day, you are teaching your mind that you can endure, that something good will show up, and that you don't deserve the worst.
And this process of deep emotional knowing eventually leads us to a completely new perspective on the people who raised us, which the source frames as the tragedy of childhood.
This was one of the most striking parts of the text for me.
Me too. They use the French writer Marcel Proust as an example. Proust was deeply, famously traumatized as a child because his mother missed a goodnight kiss while she was busy attending a dinner party.
Just one kiss.
Just one kiss. But to little Marcel, it was an apocalyptic, life-defining trauma. His world ended. But his father, an intelligent, practical guy, just thought it was a minor scheduling issue.
It wasn't malicious?
No, it was just a tragic, yawning chasm of misunderstanding between the adult mind and the child mind.
Children completely lack the context to understand adult lives. If a parent is grumpy because they are terrified of losing their job and failing to pay the mortgage, a 5-year-old doesn't think about macroeconomics.
Right, they aren't reading the Wall Street Journal.
No, the 5-year-old's brain just assumes, I am the cause of this anger, I am bad. Recognizing this tragedy helps us move past excessive blame. Serious, lasting damage occurred. But it usually wasn't born of evil intent. It was just ordinary, flawed people failing to meet the immense psychological needs of a developing brain.
Which perfectly explains why we struggle so much with the concept of splitting. a term coined by the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein.
Klein is brilliant on this.
She observed that infants literally lack the cognitive ability to understand that one person can have different moods. A baby will split their mother into two entirely different entities: the good mother who magically appears with milk, and the bad mother who frustrates them by walking away.
They literally cannot comprehend that it's the exact same person.
And the problem is that many of us carry this lack of object permanence for personality right into adulthood.
We do this with our spouses all the time.
All the time. We idealize a partner when they are attentive, viewing them as our flawless soulmate. But the second they frustrate us, they forget the dry cleaning or they use a sharp tone, we violently turn on them. We split. We instantly view them as a monster who is actively trying to ruin our lives.
It's exhausting.
It is so exhausting. You're bouncing between angels and demons all day.
It is a massive psychological achievement to finally stop splitting and accept the gray area. To realize that the people we love, including our parents and our partners, are not pure angels or complete demons.
They are a bewildering mix of kindness and meanness, brilliance and tragic mistakes.
True emotional maturity is accepting that people are, as Winnicott famously put it, just good enough.
And that gray area is captured so beautifully in what the source calls the bittersweet past. They describe the experience of looking at an old photograph where you're at the beach with friends, grinning, having an imaginary conversation with a pineapple.
It's this hilarious, deeply joyful memory.
But the joy is instantly mixed with the sting of reality. You didn't study hard enough that year. Some of those friendships faded away bitterly. You know that the grandmother who took the photo is gone. It forces you to hold two opposing emotions simultaneously.
Bittersweet memories force us to acknowledge that the positive is never far from being devilishly entwined with something difficult.
Yeah.
The child mind wants things to be black or white, good or bad, safe or dangerous, but adult life is gray. To be open to the bittersweet is to finally accept ambivalence.
You can profoundly mourn the childhood you didn't get, while still fiercely loving the deeply flawed people who tried to raise you.
Exactly. And this brings us to the ultimate lesson of the source, what it actually means to become an adult.
Because having a mortgage and a driver's license doesn't make you an adult. Psychologically, many of us are still toddlers, just wearing suits and reacting to authority figures.
Becoming an emotional adult means realizing that the authority figures in your head, the voices making you timid or forcing you to people pleasers, or terrifying you with the prospect of failure, they are operating on vastly outdated scripts.
The circumstances just don't apply anymore.
You don't live in that house anymore. You don't have to be the quiet one or the golden child to survive. You are finally free to walk away from dynamics that hurt you, to state plainly what you need, and to accept a bittersweet, profoundly imperfect life.
It is an incredible shift in perspective. To realize the war is over, and you can put your armor down.
That's the real work.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own. If our childhoods really are the invisible scripts we've been unknowingly acting out all these years, what if you stopped trying to rewrite the past and instead focused entirely on recognizing the exact moments today where you are still handing the pen to the ghost of your 5-year-old self?
Yeah,